our body, our ancient body, brilliant body, knows what to do with bone broth when we nourish ourselves with with sacred animal foods. There is a digestion and a kind of calming to the nervous system, and a deep nourishment that happens in a way that our ancestors would have recognized.
Hey friends, welcome to the Medicine Stories podcast, where we are remembering what it is to be human upon the earth. This is episode 88. I'm Amber Magnolia Hill. Today I'm sharing my interview with Katya Nova. Sort of goes in two parts. The first part is all about Katya's life, being born in Ukraine, now in Costa Rica, living with her ex-husband and their 4 kids, and his new partner, Nikki, and her 3 kids. So 3 adults raising 7 kids in the jungle, and how that all came to pass and what it looks like. And then we get into food and nourishment, from our vegan pregnancies and postpartum periods to now, after long meandering paths, eating for our biology and not our ideology. And underlying the whole conversation is the question, how do we balance parenthood, sexuality, nourishment, and fulfilling our deepest dreams and desires? I don't think there's an answer for that, but I think it's a question worth exploring that every woman and mother I know is constantly exploring. You'll hear at the very beginning of the interview the story of how Katya and I met. It's really beautiful. And we've stayed connected online ever since. And in 2020, Katya invited me to be a part of her new project called Matriarchy Collective, which is a collection of online videos, interviews, talks, resources from a bunch of different women, wise women, matriarchal women. And it was this amazing village. Like she said, it was almost like a festival with frequent Zoom gatherings and rituals. And it was a wild success, and it was super fun to be a part of. And I learned so much from watching the other women's interviews and videos. And I'm so stoked now to be a part of what she's calling Matriarch 2.0, the Confessions. So it started out being called Confessions of an Ex-Vegan, and I was really stoked watching this idea unfold in her Instagram stories. Katya's always sharing a lot about her process and what she's going through and creating, and I just loved it because I came out as ex-vegan 15 years ago. It's a big part of my story. I've shared it a number of times on this podcast, but go into it much deeper and share things I've never shared before in my talk on Confessions. And then it evolved, though, into Confessions of a Well-Nourished Woman, when Katya realized it's not just about transitioning away from a plant-based diet. It's about so much more than that. Psychedelics, sexuality, relationships, everything, all the things we modern matriarchs deal with in our day-to-day lives. A couple days ago, I was taking a walk with my beloved friend, Susie Hazen, who was my guest on episode 18 of this podcast, the first one, really, where I talked about my vegan journey, and we talked really openly about animal-based eating. And on this talk, Susie said something that will always stick with me. She said, well, yeah, it's not medicine lessons, it's medicine stories. We were talking about how we learn through story, we learn through conversation. These really like didactic, preaching at classroom type ways of learning tend to shut people down, and information doesn't stay with us as well as it does as when it comes through people's shared stories, often in a conversational form. So that's why I do this podcast. That's why I love Matriarch Collective, and now the Confessions within Matriarch Collective, because it's a collection of stories that will help you step away from diet culture towards a more pro-metabolic way of eating and living, and gives you the most simple, delicious, nutrient-dense, and kid-approved recipes and kitchen hacks. So my most recent episode 87 with Kimber Malden just went crazy. Like the amount of responses I have gotten in Kimber as well has been overwhelming. So if you loved that one, you're going to love this one. In my talk within the confessions space, we go into my whole vegan and vegetarian history. And again, I share things I've never really been comfortable sharing publicly on the podcast. So I'm sharing them there behind a little paywall. The moment I woke up to what I had done to my health all those years and coming out of the vegan closet, I kind of turned the tables on Katya and become the interviewer. And we talk about what piece of information in the book Nourishing Traditions made Katya cry, the story of her birth and how the doctor slapped her mother, how her mom's milk dried up when Katya was a 3-month-old baby, and then now recently Katya's milk dried up when her 4th baby was the same age that she was when her mom's milk dried up, and turning to ancestral practices for feeding infants when mother's milk isn't an option anymore. So homemade whole foods formula recipes, goat milk, other nursing women. We talk about why intuitive eating isn't enough, why we stopped forcing our little ones to eat vegetables. I challenged Katya on a post she made that said, animal foods build, plant foods cleanse. And we explore why I question the second part of that sentence. And we talk about the legacy of my mom's constant dieting and desire to be healthy as I was growing up, and what I wish I could share with her now if she was still here. So those are all part of my talk in the confessions. Of course, there's a link in the show notes. It'll be the first link down there. Other women interviewed who have been on this podcast include Rochelle Garcia Saliga, Kimber Malden, Ariella Daly, Michaela De La Mico, and Marisha Mirnowska. Other women who have not been on my podcast, but I would love to be, and I repost their content on Instagram all the time, are Tara of Slow Down Farmstead, Valadia of Earth Mama Medicine, and Kendra of The Holistic Mother. So link to get access to all of this will be in the show notes, as well as the link to a masterclass taught by Katya and Nikki, her sister wife, called Cosmic Meal Plan for Picky Eaters, which is amazing. It's all about how they feed their collective 7 children every day, in and out, in and out, in and out. So there's also 2 Patreon bonuses to go along with this. The first one is an extra 17-minute conversation between Katya and I, in which we talk about cultivating Bumble expertise and the power of clear intentions and unadulterated honesty when dating online, the vulnerability of dating and sex again after marriage and 4 kids. So she's super duper honest here about what her post-divorce online dating sex life looks like. And it's different than anything you've heard from anyone before about this. And I share the 2-second action that never fails to snap me out of the state of feeling annoyed with my husband or children. This is some really deep, ancient, biological, primal shit that so easily snaps me out of that stressful state. The second Patreon bonus is an ebook from Katya called 15 Ancestral Kitchen Tips for a Recovering Vegan. It's lovely, and I love this quote that I saw in here from one of my favorite ever cookbooks that I discovered very soon after I stopped being vegan, Full Moon Feast, Food and the Hunger for Connection by Jessica Prentice. The quote is, "The more a culture is intact, the fewer cookbooks it produces." I mean, how many cookbooks does our culture produce? How many cookbooks are on your shelf? I have very, very many. Very, very many. And I encourage you to listen to the end. I do a little outro, and in that I share one tiny food change, one pro-metabolic biology hack that I have made since recording the last interview with Kimber. So I hadn't done this yet at that time, that has me sleeping through the night. It put an end to my night waking, and many other friends have done this as well and are so stoked that they are waking up completely refreshed. It's so simple. And again, it's just rooted in our ancestral biology. So, one last thing before we get into the interview, I want to share words from this post by Mineral Shaman on Instagram. This account has been blowing my mind. It's somewhat new. I see all the people I love to follow the most sharing his words as well. So the post goes, humans are the only species that need to read books about what to eat or how to give birth or how to breathe. The deer don't have doulas or midwives or OBGYNs. The lions don't take breathwork classes. The rabbits don't rely on their nutritionists to plan out the perfect meal plan. The eagles don't have life coaches. That's my favorite. It's in our nature to know these things too, but humans have been overthinking since the dawn of civilization. We must relearn how to feel deeply, to revel in connection with the elements and earth, and to listen to the whispers of our body's innate wisdom. We must remember ourselves into community where we can fully see, support, and heal each other. We must let go of what we think we know about who we are and allow ourselves to become so much more. So here we all are living in these modern times, not living in ancestral times, needing that help, needing that guidance, even though we know it's not ideal or not how our ancestors lived. We are modern matriarchs making the best of the culture that we've been given. And I'm so grateful for wayfinders like Katya and for creating amazing containers like The Confessions, like Matriarch Collective. I'm so grateful to have this podcast and be able to share medicine stories with you instead of medicine lessons. And so let's dive right into this beautiful interview with Katya Nova. Katya, welcome to Medicine Stories.
Amber, my love, I'm so happy to finally be here.
Yes, we've been talking about this for a while. And I want to spontaneously actually tell the story of how we met. I know that I told this at the end of your interview with me for Matriarch Collective, but I just want the people listening to know who you are and this beautiful moment that happened. So it was at the Spirit Weavers gathering. It was in Mendocino at the time, 2016. I was just getting into my 7th month of pregnancy, and it was the last day of the gathering. And there was this beautiful ceremony, the closing ceremony that I had participated in previous years, and other women's gatherings I'd been to had done similar closing ceremonies, and it's very emotional. And my mother had died in a car accident 6 months previous. And I was like, I can't participate this year. I'm going to be a weeping mess. Like I'm going to fall apart if I participate. So I'm just going to watch. So I watched like the first half from the upstairs of the big lodge that was right there. And I felt great. I was like, this is so beautiful. I love all these women. And then I walked downstairs into the little tea room. And I don't know if it was the change in setting. I don't know what happened. But as soon as I walked in that room, I fell apart. I was a sobbing mess. And it was one of those times where I was like locked in it. Like I couldn't get a breath. I couldn't find my way out of it. And then at some point, this beautiful woman appears in the doorway, pushing a stroller with a baby in it. Or he was like 1 maybe at the time. And I didn't know who you were at the time, but you saw me and you just came, you sat right next to me. You showered me with the love and witnessing that I needed in that moment. And I don't think a lot of people, could have done it the way you did. It was just perfect. And it was exactly what I needed. And I was so grateful. And, we talked a little bit, and then Zion needed you and you moved on, and the ceremony ended. And then later I found you online, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at this amazing, beautiful woman doing all this work in the world. And holy shit. So thank you so much, Katya, for just blessing a total stranger with your love and attention that day.
We're 1 minute in and I am sobbing, of course. I love you. And this just speaks to how interconnected we are and how we are all just part of one big womb, one big pulsing organism. We show up for each other in small ways and big, and we never really know what
impact, one hug, one moment of holding space can make. So thank you. I love that story so much. And Spirit Weavers was such an extraordinary experience for me. I flew from Dominican Republic, where I was living at the time, with a 1-year-old, which is crazy. And he was, we call him a spirited child. And so I had many moments of breakdown where other women held me during that week.
Yes. I took, when my oldest was 2, I took her to the Northern California Women's Herbal Symposium, and I left after one night. I was like, this just actually isn't worth it. Like, I'm not enjoying myself. I'm not relaxing. It's so hard. So since then, when I'm at these gatherings, I really try to support the mamas with little ones. No, like camping and getting yourself to breakfast on time, and let alone trying to enjoy a class. Like, good luck. So I want to, I don't know a lot about you, actually, even though, like I told you, I'm pretty sure I see every story you put up on Instagram for years and years. I would like to know, maybe we can kind of base this quick bio on like geography. I know you've lived in many countries, the places you've lived, the people who were a part of those moves, and your family.
Thank you so much. That's a great place to root. Sometimes I joked before what's unfolding in Ukraine. As of recent, I've joked that I am a citizen of the world. And it feels really true to me, because although I was born and raised in Ukraine for the first 12 years of my life, I then proceeded to live the second kind of third of my life in Canada, and then the final third thus far in Dominican Republic, before moving to Costa Rica, where I have lived now for a little less than a year. So I've really been kind of all over the place. And that feels really exciting for a young woman. And also, it's really easy to forget who you are. And so I really appreciate your question, because now more than ever, I've been on this never-ending search for, what does this ancestral healing mean in my life? What does it mean to be a rooted woman, a woman steeped in tradition, a woman healing through her ancestry, and also thriving through her ancestry? So yeah. Ukraine is never a place that I consider really like my home, because I was very young when I left. But it's through cooking and song that I've been reclaiming my roots, and just remembering the wisdom of my grandmothers through some of these ancestral traditions. Now living in Costa Rica, I'm happier than I've ever been in my whole life. I think this is my favorite place that I've ever lived. And it feels like this is going to be home. This is the place where I will root into in a way that I never have before, because we just closed on a property, on a piece of land. It's a beautiful place up in the mountains, about 2 hours away from the coast. If anyone knows Envision Festival, it's kind of a 2-hour drive up towards the mountains, a colder area of Costa Rica. And it's a 4.5-acre piece of land that I am so looking forward to stewarding. And we can get into it, but geographically speaking, maybe that's where I feel like I've really landed now, being 35, feeling like I'm this modern matriarch of my family, and finally having found a place, an actual place to be.
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about how your family, your 4 kids, sort of dissolved and then made itself anew in Costa Rica there. But I'm curious, with the devastating news out of Ukraine and having your feed flooded with this news, and talking to your family members who are there and talking to folks there. I mean, you can talk about any piece of that you wish, but is it evoking memories that haven't been present in a long time?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me touch my heart and touch my womb space and just see what wants to come through about that. Of course, the two places where we go uh, are grief and joy when it comes to memories of childhood. And I remember the very first time that I visited Ukraine after we had immigrated to Canada. I was 18 years old, and I remember coming back to my childhood home and just falling to my knees in front of my childhood house and bawling my eyes out because nothing was the same. And you know how when you're really small, everything seems really big, like physically, right? And I was looking around and I was like, wow, everything is so tiny and everything is so like just it doesn't feel the same because the spirit of my family was no longer in that house. And so it was just this realization that memories just live within us and not in the physical places anymore. So just that realization that that was really not home, and I had to find a home within myself. That was really challenging. And then fast forward maybe another decade, there had been a fire that completely destroyed the home. My family back in Ukraine, they sent us a picture, and I actually printed out the picture and I have it on my altar, on my ancestor altar, because now that place feels like an ancestor. And so all the memories that I have of growing up in Ukraine are just so beautiful. We lived in the countryside. I had a big garden. There were chickens. I loved just going into the garden with a big pitcher of water and just like washing strawberries and dill and eating everything and picking eggs. And all of those memories are kind of finding their way back into my life now as I'm preparing to start a homestead. But yeah, it's just adding to the beauty and the pain as I see the devastation happening in Ukraine. And I know that there are just so many narratives as we don't know what to believe as we watch the news and our Instagram feeds. But what I see is what my family and friends tell me. And they say things like my best friend just sent me a message and she was like, I just started smoking again because since the last time she was smoked when she was 12 years old and we were hiding behind our school. And she says, I started smoking because I can't breathe. I can't take a breath because our cities are being bombed, destroyed, and it's hard to leave. And so it's these stories that feel so gut-wrenching that I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to come back or if I'll ever bring my children there. And yet there's this pride and there's this soul that's awakening in all the people. It's like this collective strength and resilience. And being here in Costa Rica, I feel it too. For the first time in my life, I have been feeling truly fucking Ukrainian. I'm like, okay, what can I do other than meditate and send love and raise money? Well, I'm going to make my sauerkraut. I'm going to make cabbage rolls. I'm going to remember my grandmother's prayers. I'm going to sing in Ukrainian. And so there's this really interesting thing that happens, I think, when we feel the pain and the grief is it's strengthening our rootedness kind of into the like on a cellular DNA level, Yeah, so that's what I'm feeling. That's like a really long-winded.
That's so beautiful. Just last night, I listened to Barry Weiss's latest podcast. Her podcast is called Honestly, and the title of this was Things Worth Fighting For. And she writes about that in the beginning, this like collective spirit that's rising in Ukraine. And it was so beautiful to read about and to understand. And then she's comparing it to America, which is just being torn apart by culture wars and identity politics. And so she's kind of making like that comparison, but to then hear that from someone with people who are still there from you, and to really, that's just really beautiful. And I mean, when you interviewed me a few days ago and I was in South Lake Tahoe, my hometown, every time I'm there, which is a couple times a year, I go on a drive by myself. And it's usually like I went to the grocery store and then I'm leaving and I'm like, oh, I wonder if I could find my way to Lindsay's old house. Oh, yeah, there, and I always end up sobbing. Every single time I sob as I drive around. And I always go to the house I grew up into. And I did that this time, and it's different. The people have changed it, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, it's the same, but it's different. And I think about that all the time. And I have no words for it. I can never find the words, like memory and nostalgia and how things live inside us, even though they don't exist anymore. And my favorite writers and speakers are people who can actually do justice to these giant feelings of loss and childhood and memory.
Right.
Why did your family move to Canada?
Yeah, that's a big loaded question. Why does anybody leave the place where they're born?
Yeah, and then why did you leave Canada?
So I was 12 when we left. And so let me see how concise I can be. Well, it sucked to be living there because the Soviet Union fell apart in 1991. And my parents were doctors. My dad was at that time an ENT surgeon, one of the top surgeons in our city, which is Kharkiv. Maybe some people have heard it because it's being bombed heavily. It's just, yeah. So that's my hometown. And my mom was a neurologist there. So we were a family of, like an upper middle class. And yet it was really hard to make ends meet. The only way that we could was because we had a house in the countryside, and my mom was canning tomatoes and like preserving meat, and we had a root cellar, and that's the only way that we could survive. Also bartering. And I remember my dad was being paid for surgeries in like chickens, or if somebody worked at like a chocolate factory, the only way that they could pay was in boxes of chocolate. It was an interesting way to live, and people still live like that in many places in the world. But my parents really wanted a better life for me, and so they had done everything they could to leave. And there were several options. Of course, the States. Everyone tries to go to the States, and it's challenging. Canada was maybe the top choice. Peru even was a consideration, and so it was such a process to apply. And like my parents sold everything we had in order to pay a lawyer and find a way to immigrate. And the process took 3 years. So I remember there were conversations kind of in hushed tones around the dinner table. And my parents didn't know what the outcome of that process would be, even though they paid everything to this immigration lawyer. And then one day, I remember it was such a celebration, although I didn't really know what that meant for our life, but our lives would change forever. And my parents received a letter of acceptance to come to Vienna for an interview. And upon, successful completion of that interview, we would be able to leave and move to Canada. And we came to Canada with, I remember we had 3 suitcases, not a whole lot of money, something like maybe an equivalent of about $200. And we relied on the help of a church and some kind neighbors, and slowly built our life. And that was in 99. So many, many years ago. And with that unfolded, of course, a teenage journey of being in a new country, learning English language, getting into a whole lot of trouble as a teenager. Mm-hmm. All of that. Mm-hmm.
Wow, yeah. How are your parents now?
Oh, they've built such a beautiful life. They were actually able to become nurses because, as it goes, diplomas are not recognized when people move like this. Mm-hmm. But they've built really beautiful careers, and even now they're in Canada. And they come visit. When I lived in Dominican Republic for 10 years, they would come usually twice a year. yeah, they haven't visited us here in Costa Rica yet, but that's coming. And it's getting harder and harder because now we have all these beautiful kids and we miss the kids. And I do hope that we're going to be living in one place in the near future.
Uh-huh. So what brought you to Dominican Republic?
Oh my gosh, isn't that interesting how fate, destiny has a way of magnetizing us to these really unique places. I became a wedding photographer, even though I have a degree in psychology and business, which is pretty useless.
Not really, though. I mean, thinking about like the businesses that you've built and you're really good at marketing.
I guess, but all of that knowledge, I would say, did not come from school. It came from learning from people who were actually doing it. So I remember sitting in lectures in university with my laptop open and just reading the lecture ahead of time so that in class I can zone out and do research into photography, because I knew that I really loved people. I really loved creating beautiful moments and emotion. And I saved up for a camera, like a really nice one. And it was a really lovely way to make a bit of extra money. And I was always taking it a little bit further. So where I learned my business skills is really, I would say, okay, who is really doing it right? And at the time, so this was maybe a decade ago, and I would say even now, SoCal was the place where wedding photographers were making a ton of money. There was like celebrity status for wedding photographers. So I would take their workshops and fly, save up my money and fly to learn. And then eventually I got a booking for a destination wedding, and it was in Dominican Republic. That was interestingly a time when I met Rob, who would become my husband. And I said, hey, do you want to fly with me? These people are paying for my trip. I'm staying there for a week. Come on vacation with me. And so we went, and it's of course so beautiful, stunning beaches, white sand. And I remember we went for a walk maybe the day after the wedding, which went really beautifully. And I remember thinking, wow, okay, there's tourists, yes, but also these people look like they live here. They're wearing jeans. They're not, laying on the beach. Wait a minute. What if we live here? That would mean that people don't have to fly us. We're already here. What if we could establish ourselves? And at that time, there wasn't really anyone of the caliber that North American brides were seeking. So we just did it. We made the move. And at that time, there wasn't Instagram. There wasn't Facebook groups. There was none of that. So it was a really grassroots effort I was not new to that. I was like, okay, we can do this. And we just ended up staying.
And your relationship was new.
Very new. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
You're like really the queen of leaps of faith and trusting what's calling you and going for it 100%.
Thank you. Thank you for seeing that. Yeah. When I think back to that time, it's, we were young, we didn't have kids. We rented this apartment that cost about, I think, $400 or $500. The water was so harsh and, smelled like sewage. And because we were so close to the beach, with terrible furniture and cockroaches. It's not what you think when you think like, oh, you moved to a Caribbean island. It must have been so wonderful. And it was. But at first, we really had to work hard to be known. And I remember my parents were like, oh, you just wait. When you come back home with the tail between your legs from your extended vacation, don't worry, you can stay in the basement. You can live in the basement. So the rebel and the matriarch in me was like, fuck no, I'm going to make a beautiful life. I'm not coming back to live in your basement. And I never did.
Mm-hmm. So at that time, what was your and Rob's vision for your life and for your future? And how has that shifted?
Wow. You just are going right for it. The vision was so beautiful. We loved to travel. We loved festivals. We loved mindfulness. We loved wine. And and so all of those things we did, we ended up, we would work really hard for a season and then save up. And we took several trips to India to do different yoga teacher trainings. We traveled to places like Bali and Thailand, so many festivals, Burning Man several years, all before we started having kids. And then, you know, when you love each other and you, you want to form a family, that was the next step. And so we got pregnant, and then we did like one big trip. It was India, Bali, Thailand, Burning Man. And they were like, okay, and then we're going to conceive. And so we did, and we still would work our weddings in Dominican Republic and started having babies. And it turned out we were really good at that. Yeah, how many? So it was like 5 pregnancies in 7 years. Mm-hmm.
2 boys, and then a girl, and then a miscarriage, and now you have a baby boy.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, I don't know how the last one snuck in there, but I joke sometimes that I'm like a 3D printer for souls.
At some point, you and Rob started this podcast, Honey Talks. And I think, I mean, even though I had, you know, we had already met and I'd been following you, but that's when I really started tuning in. And that was a lot about sex and the female body and relationships. And you guys were very honest and vulnerable about how having kids changes a sexual relationship. And I guess I don't even know what my question is. Well, let's talk about the evolution of your marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is a really important piece. So I want to preface this by saying that I am a manifesting generator. And once I started learning about human design, I really gave myself permission to kind of just be okay with having so many cookie jars in my life, just having so many projects. So I know that throughout this conversation, we're jumping around, and there's like Matriarch Collective, there's the Honey Talks podcast, there's my past life of being a wedding photographer, and just all of these things that I've done in my life. There of course is a common thread woven through it. But yeah, there's a lot of projects that sometimes felt seemingly unrelated. One of them, and maybe the first time that I really, other than my Instagram account, put myself out there and really put our story out there, was with Honey Talks podcast. And when Rob and I went on, especially road trips, or especially when a little bit of wine was involved, we would have really good conversations, and we would constantly say, you know, we should be recording this because I bet you other people are experiencing this too. And, you know, even now, like we're not together anymore. For anyone who doesn't know, spoiler alert, we, after 10 beautiful years, are not together anymore. But we've always been such good friends. That's always been the common denominator. We've laughed so much. We're truly a solid team, even now. And so because we were working together, living together, traveling together, all of it, well, maybe it's a bit of a cliche, but intimacy tends to kind of take a back seat. Like I'm talking passion and good sex tend to kind of fizzle out when you are working together, and often kind of snapping at each other because one person didn't do this or that, and it just slowly fizzles out. Add to that a child, then yeah, oftentimes it gets even worse. And so the first episode of our podcast, I believe, was called something like, "Is there really sex after kids?" It was something clickbaity like that. And so we recorded a really honest conversation because after I had Zion, my first, who is 6 now, 6.5, I had a beautiful pregnancy. I had a beautiful birth with a midwife. She never touched me. She never checked me. It was like textbook, perfect by all accounts. And yet sex was painful for a year, maybe a little more than a year after that. It literally felt like there were shards of glass at the entrance of my yoni when there was even hint of penetration of any kind. And I go into this quite deeply in my newest project called The Confessions. We talk about this with Carly Ray and kind of the healing that is connected to often like plant-based journeys and the resiliency of our tissues. But at that time, it just really took me by surprise. And I was feeling so much inadequacy and grief. That as this new mom who was super healthy, drinking my green juice on the white sand beaches of Dominican Republic, behind the scenes, I was having no sex at all and no libido, no desire. And so for a while, like a husband can be wonderful and understanding, and something needs to change, right? And so that actually led us to healing modalities. And one of them was a THC infused lube that our friend made. And that was what changed things. So I don't know if it was a combination of things. I mean, we hadn't had sex for over a year and I was healing more or less. And so with that THC infused lube that was just like homemade by a friend, we were finally having like pretty decent sex for the first time in a long time. And so Honey Talks was kind of a project where we would speak very openly and honestly about our life behind the scenes, our relationship, our sex. And the idea was to bring that product out into the world. And so we created a brand called Fucking Honey, FKN Honey. It's still it's still on the back burner. Maybe one day we'll make it. But we were just so inspired, that those two things were supposed to be fused. Mm-hmm. And then Honey Talks just became a place where I could say things that I couldn't in a short Instagram post.
Mm-hmm. And you started interviewing all sorts of healers, and it was really all based on, like women's health, sexuality, pelvic health. I remember the one with Christine Kent. Is that her name?
Mm-hmm.
Loved that. That really, really shifted some things for me. But I've been a mom for 15 years now. And every time I'm with my mom friends, other women in heterosexual relationships, this is what we talk about. We talk about the difficulties of being married to a man, raising children together. We talk about sex and the lack of desire that comes after you have kids. But we talk about you a lot too, especially since you've been so honest about your relationship dissolving and reforming. Like I have a really close girlfriend who 2 little kids, and she's going through a divorce. She like woke up one day and was like, I'm gay, first of all. Why did I marry this man 11 years ago? She hooked up with a woman. She's like so vibrant and vital and stoked on life and starting all these new projects. And really, she like loves you since I introduced her to you. And she's like, oh shit, how do I make this work financially? Oh God, how are we going to live? What is, and I've seen so many women go through this, including myself with my first partnership. So, and like, when Sex at Dawn came out 10 plus years ago, I like led a book group all about that. Me and various friends have always talked about other relationship configurations that could happen. So oh man, you were like teasing your followers for so long though. You're pregnant with your fourth. You're pregnant with your fourth, and you're like, we're opening up the marriage. I'm connecting with my ex. I'm flying up to Canada to meet him. You just had us all on the edge of our seats. Like, what is going to happen? How do we? I don't, it's such a big question. I don't even know if like fulfilling our needs is what I'm looking for. How do we follow our deepest dreams and desires while being mothers in partnership? And I don't think there's an answer for that, but tell us how this has unfolded for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that to some people it sounds and looks insane what I had done, but as you so kindly put it, I've just taken leaps of faith in my life, and I don't know if that's ever going to change. And so some people say like, "Oh, you're so brave for doing that," but it doesn't feel brave to me because it feels like the only way. Because if I don't do it, I'm going to suffocate. Mm-hmm. And so there's something to be said about following anything that makes your heart feel expansive. So even as I'm saying this right now, I'm feeling like my shoulders go back and my heart open a little bit. At any time, even in the day, we always have a choice. Do I follow the impulse that brings my heart forward, or do I not? And the more we practice doing that, the more it's like the obvious thing, even if it feels really scary or really inconvenient or just plain crazy. And so what I did was plain crazy, and it didn't work out, but it also did really beautifully. And there were clearly really big lessons. So yeah, there's a lover that has been a catalyst in my life for a lot of heart expansion and also a lot of pain. I was in love when I was 20 years old, and things didn't end well then, but I never was able to forget him. And so 14 years later, we had never kept in touch. We had one friend in common that I knew I could reach out to see how he was doing. And I don't know what possessed me, Amber. I don't know. Something did. And I didn't even realize that it was Valentine's Day. This was last year. February 14th, I'm 8 weeks pregnant. Something possesses me to reach out to a mutual friend and ask about this ex-lover. And he answered right away. And I got a phone number, and like without even realizing what I was doing, my fingers were already typing a WhatsApp message to this man that I hadn't spoken to in 14 years. And almost immediately we started talking. And then like, I remember I went to the beach and my heart was pounding because we were going to have a video conversation. And so there I was sitting on a kind of lawn chair, wind in my hair on the beach, not knowing if I was going to like cry or laugh or what, seeing this man's face. And I thought we were going to just talk one time and that would be it. I just wanted to see how he was doing, if he was married, if he had kids. But that's not what happened. We talked again, and then again, and then again. But it was that very night on February 14th, the first time we talked, I came right back, home to Rob. And that evening I was like, I have to be super honest with you. I reconnected with an old love. We just talked. And I want to ask you, how would you ever feel if like he came here and we had a weekend together, or like at some point in my life ever, would you be okay with me connecting with him in an intimate way? Because Rob and I had talked about non-monogamy a ton on our podcast and in life behind the scenes, but it was always kind of hypothetical because I honestly had no desire for sex. I had no libido. I thought there was something wrong with me for so many years because the way that I would describe it is it felt like I was seeing sexuality in black and white. Like, I know what it feels like. I know it's there, but I'm not seeing color. It's just gone. Like, there's just no desire, no libido. And I thought it was connected to, breastfeeding for so many years, the pelvic prolapse, like all of these things. And yes, that is true. But also I apparently needed a catalyst to wake me the fuck up in that way. And that's what this lover did. Yeah. And I went to see him and Rob was like, of course, go, because we thought, this is going to spice up our marriage. It's going to be wonderful. And I remember Rob saying things like, why don't you go see him now before you're too pregnant? Yeah, and I did. And so then the conversations about polyamory unfolded in our family. We dived deep into everything. So it was podcasts and books, and what's the main one? Ethical Slut is the main one. And of course, Sex at Dawn. Then there's also Untrue by Dr. Wednesday Martin, who I interviewed also on Honey Talks. That was a really eye-opening book about how the myths we believe about female sexuality are just so off. But things did not unfold the way that we were hoping. I thought that I would just be this modern matriarch with 2 husbands. At that time, we were looking for land in Dominican Republic, and I thought, I can have it all. I really can. I can stay married to Rob, whom I love dearly, with there would be all these children, and then I'm also going to have my other love living with us. And so, everyone was on board with this, but life has other other plans. Mm-hmm.
So what happened when you went to Canada?
We had a passionate 2 weeks. I realized that there's nothing wrong with me. I can see color. And wheels were set into motion to figure out how to merge our lives together. And it was a really beautiful time. It was a really kind of heart expanding time. But I was also stuck between these 2 paradigms. I knew that I wanted to live in a place like Dominican Republic or Costa Rica. At that time wasn't really an option. But I knew I didn't want to be living in Edmonton, Canada, in a residential neighborhood. How it's not really set up. That kind of a life is not set up for polyamory. What I was imagining was a beautiful piece of land with, several homes and communal areas. And it quickly became apparent that my lover wasn't exactly down with that. At first he was, but then he really wanted to be in Canada. And so the more we talked about the vision, the more it became apparent that the pieces just don't fit. And so a lot of heartbreak followed. And we actually came back to Canada for a time. So by that point, I was pretty pregnant, 7-8 months pregnant. And I know that a lot of listeners are probably shaking their head and thinking to themselves, come on, Katya, you should have known that this is not gonna end well. And I understand that. I understand that point of view. But again, I just couldn't not follow the call of my heart. Interestingly, at the very same time, our life in Dominican Republic on the island, after 10 years, beautiful years, had begun kind of falling away in a very mysterious way. So I don't know how deep we want to go into it, but I had a school that was called New Earth, and I felt so tied, and it was such a beautiful project that I felt I could never leave. Mm-hmm. But then it just so unfolded that our landlord very sneakily took over the project and kicked us out, and our contract we couldn't enforce. And that was really, really sad. Then the kind of the true matriarch of my household, her name's Carmen, rest in peace, beloved Carmen. She died at 60, and she was full of energy. She ran basically my household while I did all these projects and helped me raise my kids. And she had a tumor and died. It was devastating. And I also thought I could never leave Carmen. This is my family. We sold our house, and it just felt like all of the roots that were tying us to Dominican Republic, everything was dissolving, saying okay, the island was literally, it felt like the island was kicking us out. Our search for land also was steeped in so much mystery, because we would find a beautiful piece of land that was like in our price range and had everything we thought we wanted. And then something super bizarre would happen. Like the realtor would call us and say, guys, I'm so sorry. I actually showed you the wrong piece of land. It's not for sale. I mean, it was humorous, actually. You know, it's like spirit was playing with us.
I remember I was following along on your stories during this time, and it was a lot of hopes dashed and up and downs and back and forths. And
So then we realized that maybe Dominican is not a place for us. And at that point, yeah, it was pretty clear that our marriage needed to transition into something else. We were much better as co-parents, and yeah, I realized I didn't want to be married anymore. And that was really, really hard.
Yeah, pregnant with your fourth.
Yeah, going through 2 heartbreaks. Oh, yeah, Xavier, my last little one, he's a very special soul. I always thought, like, how much pain are you helping me hold in my womb, in my heart? I mean, it was the kind of pain, I'd never felt this kind of pain before in my life. It's the kind of pain where you want to wail. You want to just throw your body onto the earth and wail, and nothing helps. Nothing. Yeah.
So how did you end up in Costa Rica, and how did you end up having the opposite of what you envisioned, which is Rob lives on a piece of land with his 2 wives?
Well, I gotta plug my beloved sister and friend, Carla Musica. She is an Akashic Records extraordinary clairvoyant reader. And she was really helping guide me. And I was sharing these stories on Instagram as well as everything was unfolding. But I would basically call her up and have a session once every few weeks. And be like, Carla, tell me what you see. And so one of the first sessions that I ever had with her, we were looking for land in Dominican Republic. And so she dropped into the Akashic Records, and she was saying, I see something else. It's not on the island. And she said, there's options on the island, but they feel really heavy. And there's this ancestral work that is just, it's so heavy. It's not joyful. So you could really push through and get a piece of land and stay in Dominican Republic, but there's something else waiting for you. And she just kept gesturing with her hands, with her eyes closed, to this other landmass that was kind of like geographically close, but different. And I would just shake my head and be like, Carla, no, like, check again, because we have a school here. I have a house here. My nanny / biggest support in my life. Everyone is here. I'm not leaving the effing island. Like, no, check again. But she kept saying, I see a blue house, or maybe with like a blue roof, and it's definitely not in Dominican Republic. And there's so much joy. The energy there is so much lighter and more joyful. I had no idea what that meant. It felt exhausting to even imagine that we would uproot and sell our home and pack a container. I mean, I couldn't even imagine that we would do this. But then when we were
pregnant.
Yeah, from pregnant. I'm always pregnant. I was actually going through my miscarriage, and I received maybe the most beautiful email I've ever received from a woman who's really, really dear to my heart and always will be. She wrote, you don't know me, but I've adored you for many years. I've followed you on Instagram, and our dreams are very similar. I'm watching you, heal from a miscarriage and in your search for land, in your search for meaning. we are in Costa Rica. Why don't you and Rob come? Just jump on a plane. We don't know each other, but let's meet and see if it aligns, because we're looking for family to start a homestead project with. And that's what we did. And I love her so much. It's so beautiful. She took care of me in my pregnancy and postpartum with this last baby. And she was really such an angel in my life. So that's how it happened. All of a sudden, Costa Rica was on the map, and it hadn't been before. And so it was the transition from Dominican Republic, then staying for a couple months in Canada. So I guess I did stay in my parents' basement. I did come back for a little while. And then, yeah, it was just like the leap, right? I felt like I was standing at the edge of the cliff. And I was begging the universe to please show me where to leap next, please, because I knew that Canada was not it. And so, yeah, Costa Rica was the next step.
So you get there, you have your baby, you find your land. I mean, you can go into any aspects of this that you want, but I want to hear about Nikki coming into your lives specifically, and what your life looks like now.
Yeah, so Instagram is so interesting. Like the algorithm kind of sees who you connect with and then shows you posts and comments sometimes from a while back. So it was really interesting because Nikki and I had never met, but we were following each other as mamas in this web, right? Like I'm sure everyone listening to this has had an experience like that of deeply connecting with someone or feeling deeply connected to someone on Instagram and maybe never meeting them in person or meeting them eventually. And so it was kind of like that. We were having babies at the same time. And I remember considering the name Gaia for if Zion had been a girl. And so she called her baby girl Soleil Gaia. And so we connected over that. And she was just so kind, and we would comment on each other's things back and forth for years. And I remember once she commented, we'd love to have you in Costa Rica. We have a little guest house. I hope that you come and visit one day. I just adore you, and our kids can play. And I remember reading that and thinking, oh, Nikki, you're so sweet, but that'll literally never happen. Because we were in Dominican Republic, and why would you go from one beautiful, warm place to another with a bunch of kids, right? Well, little did we know. And so that first trip to Costa Rica to scope things out, we were only coming for about maybe 4 or 5 days. And it just so happened that there was an ayahuasca ceremony. I was too pregnant to attend, but Rob got very excited about going. And so he did. And there was this place called the Garden of Eden. How fitting. He went to the ceremony and Nikki was there. And I remember I brought him there. We drove there together, and everyone was wearing white, and it was so beautiful. And Nikki recalls seeing us come out of the car, and she just kind of, had to rub her eyes. Like, are they for real? Am I seeing straight? Is this Katya and Rob? Because it was the very first time that we would be meeting in real life. And so Nikki and Rob sat in an ayahuasca ceremony, dealing with a lot of their own shit and releasing past relationships basically at the same time, and opening up to source and opening up to being surprised and delighted by what came next at the same time. Isn't it totally wild?
She had 3 kids, and she is done with that relationship at the same time.
Yes. Yeah, she had been going through a divorce, and she recalls that ayahuasca ceremony as kind of the initiation of surrender, of true surrender to what was next, and releasing the sadness and just the grief too around that relationship ending. And I remember, so her kids were there in the morning, and I made a joke that her kids looked like Rob's kids. Like I knew, I'm telling you, I knew this was going to be a thing. Mm-hmm. And it's true. Her kids could like, they all look like they could be Rob's kids. Wow.
So the 7 of your kids that are now all being raised together look like they're real siblings.
They do. They 100% do.
Okay, so you guys found this piece of land, and my understanding is that Rob and Nikki are in the main house with the kids, and you're on the land, but you have your own space.
Yeah. I mean, I think here I really want to talk about manifestation a little bit. And I'm, it's a little bit of a cringe-worthy term because we use it and overuse it. But I really was calling in help from the universe because I just felt like I was on my knees begging for such a long time for relief, really for relief, because it was just so much intensity around pregnancy and birth and living out of suitcases and not knowing where to land, looking for land for like a year and a half and just not getting any answers. And so there's just something to be said about surrender. And I already mentioned, like, maybe my biggest prayer is to be surprised and delighted. Mm-hmm. I really like to say that I am open to the universe surprising and delighting me. Something that simple. Mm-hmm. And so this place where we are now, as so Rob and Nikki are building a house right now on this piece of land that we closed on. My yurt is coming. It's been taking a bit longer than usual because of the state of the world. But the universe really did surprise and delight us because in this small, quaint town in Costa Rica, we found a place very, very easily to rent that has a main house that's big enough for all of our family needs. And 5 minutes down the hill is a cabin. This is where I'm recording with you now, and you may hear cows and birds chirping. So it really could not be any more perfect because we wanted togetherness and we also wanted boundaries and healthy separation. And so the most common question we get is, what about the kids? How did you break the news to the kids? Was it hard? Was it traumatic? And I'm really just amazed at how it all unfolded because first we started as friends. Nikki was coming over, we were cooking dinners together, all the kids were together. And kids don't really, they don't want labels, they don't care. They're getting love, they're getting snacks, they're good, right? And so with this living situation, we're all on the same property. And so to the kids, Auntie Katya or Mommy is down in the cabin where she works and sleeps. But it feels to them like this is my office and they can come visit me anytime. But then we're still all together. We're still all living together. And that feels so beautiful and so important to me. And because Nikki's just one of the most beautiful humans, maybe the most beautiful human you'll ever meet. She is pure love. She is love embodied. We kind of divide and conquer a bit. So I'm here working right now to be able to afford the land, to be able to feed our family. And she is feeding our family in a different way. She's really brilliant with all things nourishment, spiritual and physical. She used to co-own and run a restaurant in Philadelphia. And so she's just such a genius when it comes to potions and making food that the kids devour, even though they're all really picky eaters. And so it just really, really works.
I mean, even I'm sure literally every mother listening, even the ones who are judging, are like, I want that. I am jealous of this. I am jealous that you have all this space to be alone and to work, that you have someone else in the kitchen.
I know.
And that you love her and that you're good friends and that your kids have this amazing extended play community and love community. Like they're so lucky to have you two as their mama aunties. And so I also, like, yeah, manifesting can be cringy, but I think people also kind of turn their noses up at the idea of following your heart. But I am such a strong believer in that. I talk about this all the time. Like, you can see the difference in people who are happy and living the life that they wanted versus those who aren't. And obviously, there are like bigger systems in our lives, and I understand all that. But it's just each step along the way. Do you follow the heart strings that are pulling you forward? Or do you say, I can't do that out of fear or whatever it is? Whatever it is. And so, like, yeah, like you said, you had a vision, you had multiple visions that didn't come to fruition, but look at this beautiful place that you have landed.
Thank you. Yeah. And it really is humbling to realize that there's never really an end goal. Like we think that we're going to be happy when we get to this place or that. It's a windy ass road, I'm telling you. We have to keep putting one foot in front of the other, which again is a cliche, but it's true. You have to follow what feels more expansive. You absolutely do. And it will lead to another heart expanding step. And I don't know what's next. Maybe we'll record another episode in a year and my life will look completely different, right? But it's finding joy now, and it's just being okay with the wild unknown.
Yeah. And I really appreciate how completely honest and open you are about all of it, despite the fact that you have over 100,000 followers and plenty of judgment and hate coming at you for it. We are in a time where people and couples are choosing alternatives, and just to have people blazing those trails and being real about it, I think is super important. So I now want to talk about nourishment, food. One thing we haven't said through all this is that you were vegan through almost every part of the story that you've shared so far until very recently. And let's start with, you mentioned Carly Rae. So I recently watched her and Rochelle Garcia Soliga, who's been on my podcast twice, who is a part of your Confessions Project. They did this online course called Mother Foods. And it blew my mind when Carly, who does internal pelvic work on women as a body worker, talked about the women who don't have plant foods in their diet have like brittle tissue down there. Hey, just jumping in real quick to correct two mistakes in something I just said. The first you probably figured out is I'm talking about women who don't eat animal foods, not women who don't eat plant foods, of course. And I wasn't sure if brittle was the right word that Carly actually used. So I got in touch with her and she said that brittle is not correct, but the tissue inside the pelvic area, when she's doing internal work, it's less responsive, more dehydrated, and just less potent. It doesn't communicate back to her in women who do not have animal foods in their diet.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that blew my mind. And the ones who do have this supple tissue as it should be. I'm still like wrapping my mind around this. And so, yeah, let's talk about your food journey and again, this big deal moment that every ex-vegan has when they reveal how they've changed their food choices.
Dun, dun, dun. I love that you're going there. And I was kind of chuckling to myself a moment ago because an interesting segue to, between like the haters and transitioning to veganism is I'm not sure when I got more hate and more unfollows. Like it's a tie. When I shared that I'm, gonna go see a lover while pregnant, or when I announced that I'm introducing animal foods into my diet. People really got their panties up in a bunch about both of those things. And I really think that sharing honestly does more good. It was worth it. It was worth it.
Yeah, good. That's good to hear.
Yes, I absolutely adore Carly Rae and Rochelle Garcia Saliga. For anyone who hasn't seen that class, I'm sure that they have a replay. And also, we cover those topics extensively in the Confessions, which is coming out and will be evergreen as well. And so, yeah, what a journey. I mean, this loops right back into my story of painful sex and how it felt like there were like shards of glass. And I had no idea that it could be linked to my nutrition.
Yeah.
Years later, I would find out from practitioners like Carly Rae, also Kimberly Ann Johnson is a somatic practitioner who has done a lot of hands-in, hands-on work. And so what these practitioners notice is that the tissues, I'm talking internally, of women who are plant-based feel different. They are less resilient when it comes to recovering from birth. My midwife friend here in Costa Rica said that often when she's stitching someone, it really feels like the tissue's like jelly. It doesn't even hold sutures.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, to give a visual. And I was lucky not to have torn in my birth experiences, but this is what birth workers and sexological body workers are noticing. Because we are not, if we're plant-based, the truth is that no, it's not, we cannot get everything from the collagen powder and the chickpea burgers. We need animal fats. We absolutely need those fat soluble vitamins that only come from animal foods, only. And so it was a really humbling journey for me. Even just now, I'm speaking so passionately about this. And this is why I started this container of conversations of how our vegan journeys affect our health in every way. And so we're just beginning to see, and it's these frontline professionals, right, who work with the female pelvis, who are noticing what's actually happening. So I love Carly. Recently, she talked about how, so she's in a new relationship and her boyfriend was saying, your pussy feels like butter. Like it's like buttery, just so juicy and so soft. And I was telling her that I am getting the same responses because I've been doing her course called Flesh and Blood, which is really amazing. And so we work on our own with our own tissues. And I've been nourishing myself so well over the last maybe year, especially in postpartum recovering after Xavi. And I'm happy to report, I told you I'm an open book. And so I've had a few lovers since recovering from my last birth, and the comments I get are phenomenal about my pussy.
This is still just blowing my mind. This is how deep real nourishment goes. So, okay, I'm curious, like why you became vegan, what your belief systems were, why you felt that this was best, and then I don't know this story, what finally opened you to the possibility, the reality that you needed animal foods in your diet.
Yeah, that's so big. I want to start by saying that we all want to be good. And everyone listening to, whether you've ever had a vegan stint or you're still a vegan, I love you. We want to do the right thing. We don't want to cause harm. And so it just, especially for a young mind, and we discuss this a lot from every angle in the Confessions, we want to do the right thing. And because what we're putting on our plate is a choice that we're making literally, 2, 3, 4 times a day, it's right there in front of us. It's kind of easy to deduce, like, oh, look, there's no death on my plate. I'm not participating, right? I'm doing the right thing. And so for many people, it feels really good. And then add on top of that, the component of kind of cleansing and feeling lighter and you and I talked about that at length in your amazing talk for the confessions. We feel good, and often for a long time. I mean, just the other day, I had a message, a kind one at least, from a mama of 5 who is vegan, just a follower. And she's got like, I think 20,000 followers. And she's saying, like, look at me. I breastfed all my babies. I'm fine. My babies look healthy. I have a ton of energy. I've been vegan for X amount of years. And it's like, yes, how wonderful. I'm so happy for you. And can we talk about long-term health? Are you open to talking about long-term health and the impact that this is having?
And generational health.
Generational health, exactly. And for me, it was actually, I have to thank my dad, who is very diplomatic and tactful. And I think Zion, my first, was maybe a year and a half, and I breastfed him pretty much till 2. But I remember my dad saying, because my parents were devastated that I was vegan and that I was intending to raise my children vegan. And I remember my dad saying, just sitting down with me so gently and saying, okay, I trust you. Can you answer me this? Can you be 100% sure that he's getting everything he needs? Can you say beyond any reasonable doubt? Yes, you've read the China study and seen a few documentaries and motherly intuition, blah, blah. Can you be sure? Because you were being fed eggs and broth and every kind of traditional sacred food, liver when you were a little girl. You were healthy. When your mother was pregnant with you, she was eating all those foods. When you were little, so yes, you are a healthy woman because you were built from those building blocks. Can you say the same? He just offered me that question. That's all he said. And everything began, my ideology and my conviction began to crumble brick by brick because I could not say yes to that question.
And that was like 5 years ago or something. So was this like a slow unraveling for you?
Yeah. I mean, I was considering like, okay, I guess let's see if maybe I'll feed him some eggs, maybe. But then my breast milk I felt like it was, enough. And then when he was about 2 years old, maybe 2.5, Zion's teeth began crumbling out of his mouth. And for any mother, this is devastating. It is scary and devastating. His teeth were soft like chalk.
Mm-hmm.
So that led me...
Shameful too, because everyone else can see it.
Yes, exactly. It was right there. And so that began the wonderful rabbit hole of Weston A. Price. Thank goodness, I'm not sure how that entered my field. Again, we dive deep into this in the Confessions Project. The first thing that I realized was the connection of vitamin K2, which is only found in grass-fed animal sources, and bone and teeth health. And because teeth form in utero, I had a fully vegan pregnancy, proud and vegan, hashtag the shit out of that. It made sense to me, and it was really humbling and really sad. I began eating those foods myself. So we did, and I know people look down on cod liver oil. There's a lot of controversy around that, but I got at the time the best quality that I could. It was a Norwegian brand that I think called Rosita. It was cold pressed Norwegian cod liver oil. So Zion was getting that high vitamin butter ghee, because ironically I had come from an Ayurveda background, which is a whole other story. And so slowly we were introducing these foods. There's a book that I bought called Curing Tooth Decay, which is very Weston A. Pricey.
And so then after the kind of like the gateway drug of the cod liver oil and the ghee, then we started getting into organ meats. And guess what? His teeth literally remineralized. It was extraordinary. Of course, we couldn't bring back that which already had crumbled, and his teeth were kind of still like yellowish, but they were strong. Yeah.
Luckily, they were
not for a whole lot of time, because now he has like he has a mouth full of metal caps.
Oh, on his big boy teeth?
Well, they're
his adult teeth.
No, not yet. No,
Okay.
no, that's good. Yeah, like I'm not going to go too deep into it, but people can make their own conclusions about this. But my parents actually took him to a dentist in Canada.
Your older boys stayed with your parents for a while you were figuring out where you were going to land in Costa Rica.
That's right. So it wouldn't have been my choice. I would have preferred to find a holistic dentist, but I just have to trust that this is part of my journey, and I have to forgive myself for that.
Parenting. All the overwhelming choices we make. So, okay, how long were you eating this way before you came out on Instagram that you had shifted?
Yeah, that's a great one. So I was honest, because like as soon as his teeth started remineralizing and I'm telling you, I could see the difference. I was like, well, I cannot be living a lie. I cannot still be sharing and I was still cooking plant-based mostly for us, because that's just been the way for so long. I made a couple of posts about Zion's teeth, and I was flooded with messages that were really beautiful and supportive. Also messages from dentists who just were saying, you're stupid for not taking him to the dentist and for trying to fix it with nutrition. You're a negligent mother for attempting that. And then the majority of the energy pouring into this confession was from the angry vegans, because my entire following had grown to, I think the top was like 125,000, and almost overnight it went down by like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Yeah. And the hate poured in. I mean, people took the time to write really, really mean emails, even like they found my email. Yeah. And some of them were people with really big followings too. I'm not going to name, but there's one mama in Hawaii who has a really big following, really beautiful photos, really like inspirational content. And she just tore me a new one. She wrote me an email that was so long about how dare I do this to the, I'm the beacon I was the beacon of the vegan community, and now I'm spreading misinformation.
I mean, I've seen so many people go through this with their kids' teeth. And I've had people privately write me and be like, oh my gosh, I'm too afraid to say anything, but we had to stop being vegan because my daughter's teeth. And then I've seen people, come out and be open about that journey, always based on their kids' teeth. I have friends who remineralize their kids' teeth with nutrition like you did. But man, it's so interesting, isn't it? How our diets become our identities. And since I found pro-metabolic, which it seems like you and I stumbled upon this at the same time. My most recent podcast episode with Kimber Malden is all about this. You interview Kimber for the Confessions. I have had this little tagline in my head, which I don't think I've seen anyone share. And I'm like, why isn't this everyone's like tagline, which is eat for your biology, not your ideology. Eat for your ideology. So how did you find then, so I stopped being vegan 15 years ago. We talk more about this in my interview for Confessions. And then I had 15 years of incorporating animal foods, but not eating for my metabolism. That's just a few months old for me and has made just as big of a difference in the shift in my health as when I stopped being vegan. So how did you find pro-metabolic, and how has it been affecting your life?
Oh my gosh, I love this so much. Well, I've always been a foodie. Like, I love food. I love good food. And because we're such multifaceted beings who have to do it all and sit in front of the computer for so long, you and I talked about this too. It's really easy to kind of come around and realize that it's been hours since you'd eaten last. And then you're shaky and you're hungry and you didn't do any food prep. So you go to the fridge, you grab a piece of cheese or, whatever, make yourself a quick sandwich. And so it goes for many people. And so combining the ancestral ways of nourishing ourselves, which includes bone broth, fermented foods, maybe I'll just stick to those two examples for now, requires preparation, requires a little bit of forethought. And that's what's needed to eat a pro-metabolic or to live a pro-metabolic lifestyle, which is really great because it's anti-diet. It is not a diet. And I love that so much. Whether we've ever been vegan or plant-based or whatnot, even if you never were, odds are if you're listening to this, you've experimented with restrictive diets and something. Okay. Something.
Are you a modern woman?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Check. So I just love the freedom within pro-metabolic eating because you just eat a little bit of everything. And so I eat honey every time I have a meal. I really love hot foods and they really work with my constitution. So Nikki's been so amazing at making all kinds of soups and broths. And like we just always have broth going. Yeah, we're doing a lot of things with organ meats. And I've mastered a liver pate recipe that everyone loves, that we sneak into everything. And so food is it's something that I think about a lot, but I don't obsess about it as much as I did before, because there are these beautiful staples that keep us so deeply, deeply nourished and that help curb any cravings. So maybe that's kind of what I want to say about that. And then what I really love too is that there's this beautiful thread woven through all of this food preparation and food. It's like, it feels poetic to me that it is also ancestral nourishment. And I'm really passionate about talking about ancestral healing. Anytime we are fermenting vegetables, there's fermented foods in every culture. Anytime we are preparing bones for broth or just looking for scraps of veggies for a broth, it's our ancestors talking through us and nourishing us. And I really, really love that. What nourishment looks like in our home now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels so good. Even though it does take time, it takes mental energy. It takes a slowing down that most of us are uncomfortable with. But it feels so good when you're really taking care of yourself and your loved ones. I found it to be so worth it. What inspired Confessions of a Well-Nourished Woman? This is a huge project. How did it evolve? Like, what was the moment where you're like, I need to gather women and have conversations about this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for going there with me. So 2 years ago, the idea for Matriarch Collective came to me at a really uniquely pivotal time on the planet. That's when the pandemic, or some people say plandemic, whichever you want to subscribe to, it was just kind of began happening. And we all were in our homes. We didn't know what this was, but we knew we wanted to gather. And so Matriarch Collective it started out as a collection of interviews and talks and classes by women who I thought were true examples of a modern matriarch or a powerful woman. And these conversations centered around the things that we wish our mothers would have taught us, our foremothers, that they didn't. You and I had a really powerful episode. And I realized that having kind of like a set container, like a collection, really worked beautifully. And then we wanted to keep having those conversations. So that's how Matriarch Village, was born. And so I felt 2 years later now that there's another container, like the 2.0 version of that was needed. And so, yes, it's good to be having these kind of scattered conversations here and there, but I wanted impact and I wanted context and I wanted women to be able to connect the dots in a way that they maybe haven't before, which is why even in this conversation, we're talking about nourishment, we're talking about sex and pelvic floor health and all these things that you'd be surprised, right? That many women don't think are connected. And so the Confessions is a project that I'm ready for because I feel strong enough to withstand the shitstorm that comes with having these conversations. I wasn't ready to truly come out. I wasn't ready to take pictures for my Instagram where I'm holding a tray of bone marrow bones. Now I am. And yeah, so it's a really exciting project because I started gathering confessions of women who were vegan. And then, yeah, just like me, they each had a story of healing. But then I realized that it's so much bigger than that. I didn't want this collection to be just a collection of stories of how my kids' teeth were falling out. And I stopped being vegan because when we talk about being X something, we're not necessarily talking about like what's next, right? And so are we going to swinging to the polar opposite of that and going to a full carnivore diet, which is still restrictive? Mm-hmm. Are we doing keto, which is also can be quite intense? So I wanted to be in a position where not only am I talking about the ex-vegan journey, but also giving this really grounded perspective on what do we do now? Yeah. And that's where Pro-Metabolic comes in and all these extraordinary women like Carly Ray and Kimberly Ann Johnson and Rochelle Garcia-Saliga and so many others who actually, they won't, or Kelly Brogan as well, they won't even work with someone who's not willing to eat at least a tiny bit of animal foods.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're even bringing it a little bit beyond food and nourishment too. Like you interviewed Michaela, who was on my podcast a couple episodes ago. Amazing. You guys talk about sex and psychedelics.
Oh, honestly, it was one of my favorite conversations that I've ever had with anybody ever.
Yeah, me too. When she was on my show. Love her.
Oh, it was amazing. It was amazing. Yeah, I absolutely adore her.
So you're focusing on nourishment in a really big picture sense. I can't wait to watch it all. I think that Matriarch was a brilliant idea and I loved the way it worked. I loved once I was in just scrolling through and, oh yes, I want to watch this interview. Oh yes, I want to hear what this person has to say. And there's a lot too. It was like bang for your buck. So how does this work? Like, let people know if they're interested in confessions, what that looks like.
Yeah. So this time we're doing it even better. I am getting our team to kind of cut up each person's segment, because we do dive so deep, into 15, 20-minute kind of lessons. And so there is it's essentially a really beautiful course that you're getting for $97 if you're listening to this before the end of April. After that, it's a bit more expensive, but so worth it. I mean, if you were to get a consultation with any one of these brilliant women, it would be, that price or more. So it's like thousands of dollars of value. And we're going to put it on sale probably twice a year as well. So yeah, whenever you're listening to this talk, it's definitely meant to be super affordable because everybody needs this. If you're living in a female body, or if you love someone in a female body, they need to have these conversations. Yes, it's a beautiful course. We talk about deep nourishment in every way, and it's really entertaining too. I mean, these topics can get quite heavy. And for many of us, heady, and steeped in shame because we realized maybe we had been doing it wrong, so to speak. But, you and I are both so passionate about story medicine. I really believe that is how we learn best. And so, there's something for everyone, and really, really beautiful and juicy topics are covered. So psychedelics, sex, pelvic bowl health, recipes.
Because what I think is so brilliant about this way of doing it too is that, I mean, I love online courses. I definitely take a lot of them, but I also love conversational learning. Like, obviously I have a podcast and things just come through in conversation that don't come through when it's one person speaking into their computer. And things come through stories in a way that they don't when you're just giving facts.
They land completely differently for us. Yeah.
And so it's basically this giant library of conversations.
Yeah. And you can browse topics and or go by speaker.
And then with Matriarch, at least there's just like all these bonuses and extras and live meetups on Zoom, and like really a very well done. You can tell you put your whole heart and soul into it. Amazing connections happening. I found so many new people and friends through Matriarch. So I am just honored to be a part of it. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad you and I finally had this conversation for Medicine Stories too.
I love that so much. Oh, I should add. So we're constantly like, let's make sure that the confessions is really easeful and not as intense as it was, because it was essentially a festival that I put on an online festival last time. But of course, we're adding more layers and more complexity, but it's so much fun because Nikki and I are co-teaching a masterclass. Well, she's mostly doing the teaching. I'm just going to crack jokes, which is going to be called Cosmic Meal Plan for Picky Eaters. I think something like that. Because she's honestly she's just so brilliant with the way that she feeds our little tribe of 7 kids. And I think we're also going to have a virtual dinner party. There's a couple of chefs that I'm obsessed with whom I'm in conversation with. And so we're talking about doing like a ritual cooking class where you could have ingredients ahead of time prepared. And we're going to drop in and do beautiful prayer and actually cook together. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yay. I'm excited to learn from Nikki too, because hearing you talk about the way she comes up with food for the kids, that's what I need. And I need recipes. I need people being like, here, this is how you do it. Like, I don't have that particular genius in the kitchen. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too. And like, honestly, there's so many times that I come up around dinner time and I look, I'm like, how did you get them to eat this? Like they're all eating it and they're not saying anything. How did you do that? And even more than recipes, part of her genius is telling you straight up how she makes it and the variations, because sometimes we can get paralyzed if we kind of see a list of ingredients. You're like, well, I'm not going to even attempt to make this unless I have every single thing on the list. So what I love is that she really teaches like the basic concept, and then with whatever you have in the fridge, you can
like template.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I'm so excited for this. When I first saw you posting about it, I was like, yes, 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 yes. And as it builds, I've been like promoting it in my stories just because I know, I mean, the feedback I'm getting from my episode with Kimber is so overwhelming. It's crazy how uninformed we are, how far astray we've gone from ancestral and biological wisdom when it comes to nourishing ourselves. And so my heart is in this. My heart has been in this for 15 years since I first transitioned from a vegan diet and really started being wildly curious about what true nourishment is.
Yeah. What are some of the things that people are saying?
Just that either this is new to them and they're like, I literally cried listening because this is what I want in my life. And I've been so confused. Something that I said in that episode, and this is something my husband Owen said to me too, is that everything I've ever heard about food and nutrition that did or did not make sense to me makes sense within the pro-metabolic framework. And I had someone write the exact same thing to me. She's like, once I found it, it was like everything that had been confusing became clear. And someone else, what did she write about? Like clearing up her Hashimoto's. I mean, it's just extreme gratitude for being introduced to a way of eating based on biology, not ideology. And I feel like, I mean, I have been talking about nourishment for 15 years online. I told you in my talk with you that everything I do online now can be traced back to my first blog in 2008 called Nourished Mother. Nourished Mother. I mean, like, here I still am. And there's so much more information now and so many women who are smarter and more experienced than I am. And so I love being, this is what I think of my role as a podcast host, is just being a connector, a bridge between people and other people, between people and ideas. And I'm so glad you're doing all the work for this, so I don't have to, but I can just send people over to it.
But isn't it so cool how, as the consciousness rises, it's like after a rain, there's like all these mushrooms popping up at the same time. We're all talking about this at the same time. I had no idea that Rochelle and Carly were planning that class, and they had been planning it actually for more than a year. It just so happened with this beautiful synchronicity that we're all having this conversation. So clearly this is the healing that we're all longing for, and the prayer is being answered.
Yeah. I'm going to say one more thing too that I've said a number of times on this show, which is that if we are trying to connect with our ancestors, be in ancestral remembrance, we need to be doing things that our ancestors would recognize. Yes. And so this deep nourishment with animal foods, absolutely, like 100% of our ancestors, unless you happen to have a vegan parent, would recognize this.
There's something else that I recently heard that landed so deeply. It's that the opposite of holding on isn't letting go, it's digestion. And I love that so much. We focus on like cleansing, and just shedding, purging, letting go, purging, all of this stuff. And I just think that's such a beautiful way to think about the way we move through the world, is to digest. And our body, our ancient body, brilliant body, knows what to do with bone broth when we nourish ourselves with sacred animal foods. There is a digestion and a kind of calming to the nervous system, and a deep nourishment that happens in a way that our ancestors would have recognized.
Digesting, metabolizing, integrating, composting, making sense of and utilizing optimally what we take in. That simple. Let's do the things we can do to most best support that system.
I love it. It's so good talking to you always. So yummy. I just love you so much.
I love you too, Katya. Thank you for being such a brilliant fire of love and energy and goodness and care and compassion.
Same time next year?
There. Anything you do, Katya, I'm there. Okay, another super long, info-packed interview for you all. Thank you so much for listening to the end. So, of course, in show notes, anything that's ever mentioned in this podcast that has a link, there will be a link. And at the top is going to be the link to access the confessions and also the free Cosmic Meal Plan for Picky Eaters masterclass with Katya and Nikki, who you just heard so much about. And of course, Carly Ray is a part of the confessions. So if you want to learn more about those pelvic tissues, I just think this is so fascinating. And I cannot wait to watch her interview inside the confessions. And, lots of other folks that you probably know and many that you won't know. That's what I loved so much about the Matriarchy Collective that was released in 2020, was being introduced to so many new people. And again, it's not medicine lessons, it's medicine stories. Let's drink in one another's life wisdom. Okay, as teased in the intro, I want to tell you about the other, call it like a pro-metabolic life hack, because it really is, that I hadn't started implementing yet when I recorded the last episode 87 with Kimber Malden, but I have since then, and it's made a huge difference. And I just talked to Kimber a minute ago to make sure I'm explaining correctly what I've experienced with this. So this is a bedtime snack. It's a big thing in the bioenergetic pro-metabolic community to eat something, a little something, right before bed if you're in the process of healing your metabolism. So for me, for decades, I remember like my mom saying this back in the day, don't eat for hours before bed. So I was doing that for a long, long time. And what had been happening to me recently, I don't know how long it's been, but absolutely waking up sometime between 2 and 6 a.m. And what had been happening more recently was waking up at 5 every morning on the dot in a panic, not coming out of a weird dream, not related to anything going on in my day-to-day life or the state of the world, but like waking up with cortisol flooding my body at that time. So I now understand that was because it had been so long since I had eaten last, and that my blood sugar was freaking out. It was totally dropping, and I did not have the glycogen stores to release more sugar into my blood. So glycogen is the name of when sugar is stored in the liver and muscles, and people who are really paying attention to their blood sugar balance throughout the day and eating bedtime snacks will have proper glycogen storage. But my body is like not optimized for it because I wasn't giving it enough sugar/carbs for so many years. So what was happening is my blood sugar was crashing at that time of morning, and cortisol was spiking because of that. And I was waking up feeling like shit, and then being, tired and just feeling terrible all day. So now what I am doing is a slice of raw cheese. I love raw, but any slice of any dairy. So Kimber said that dairy is a great bedtime snack because it has all 3 macros, plus calcium and magnesium and casomorphine, which binds to the opiate receptors in the brain and helps you calm down and feel good. This is why vegans and people say that dairy is like a drug. But it's a good thing. It's good to feel good. Those opiate receptors exist in the brain for a reason. We're not like shooting heroin here. So thank you so much, Kimber, first of all, for taking the time to explain this to me so that I can be accurate here in this podcast. So what I'm doing is a slice of raw cheese with honey on top for the sugar, and then, whole good salt for just some extra minerals and deliciousness. It tastes so good. If you haven't done cheese and honey before, it tastes so good. And at first I wasn't doing enough honey. So I started like waking up later and later in the morning, but was still waking up feeling like shit. And then finally I just started doing like more honey than I thought, was okay. Enough to fit on one slice of cheese still, but like drooping over the sides. And since I've been doing enough honey, I have been sleeping through the night. It's life-changing. It's life-changing, right? Getting enough sleep is everything. So that's been amazing. I've had a number of friends also do this, also texting me, telling me, holy shit, I just slept through the night for the first time since my daughter was born or whatever. So yeah, that's my little pro-metabolic hack for you. I will put a link in the show notes to Kimber's Instagram post all about the magic of a bedtime snack. And, I hope that you all find the same healing and sort of mind-blowing discoveries around biology and your body that I have been finding since finding pro-metabolic. And there's going to be so many more little tips and tricks and recipes and medicine stories like this within the confessions. So I really hope to see you there, and I love you. Thank you for taking these medicine stories in. I hope they inspire you to keep walking the mythic path of your own unfolding self. I love sharing information and will always put any relevant links in the show notes. You can find past episodes, my blog, and our handmade herbal medicines at mythicmedicine.love. We've got reishi, lion's mane, elderberry, mugwort, yarrow, redwood, body oils, an amazing sleep medicine, heart medicine, earth essences, so much more than I can list there. mythicmedicine.love. While you're there, check out my quiz. Which healing herb is your spirit medicine? It's fun and lighthearted, but the results are really in depth and designed to bring you into closer alignment with both the medicine that you're in need of and the medicine that you already carry and can bring to others. If you love the show, please consider supporting it at patreon.com/medicine stories. It is so worth your while. There are dozens and dozens of killer rewards there, and I've been told by many folks that it's the best Patreon out there. We've got ebooks, downloadable PDFs, bonus interviews, guided meditations, giveaways, resource guides, links to online learning, and behind the scenes stuff, and just so much more. The best of it is available at the $2 a month level. Thank you. And please subscribe on whichever app you use. Just click that little subscribe button and review on iTunes. It's so helpful. And if you do that, you just may be featured in a listener spotlight in the future. The music that opens the show is by Marie Sioux. That's MarieeSIOUX from her beautiful song, Wild Eyes. Thank you, Marie. And thanks to you all. I look forward to next time.